welcome to week 11 of Intro to Sociology. Week 11 follows with chapter 11 in the Sociology Project text, and it's all about gender and sexuality. Since our ideas of gender, sex, male versus female, and sexuality and gender expression do sort of inform the other, like what we think about gender and appropriate gender expression somewhat informs our ideas of appropriate sexuality and sexual expression. It's a good idea that these things are covered together in your book. But as we will find as we go through this, while one may inform the other, they don't always follow together on the same parallel track. So to make this a little bit easier to understand and break down, for the purposes of class materials and the Echo lectures that follow, I've separated them into the first part being about gender and the second part being about sexuality. So both will have separate introductions this week and then topics that follow. To begin with gender, gender is certainly something that fundamentally shapes the way we see the world and the way the world sees us. So gender is what's known as a master status. It's something that we view the world through. It's a lens that kind of changes our perception. And in that way, we are very, very aware of the gender of the people that we are interacting with, and that can change our patterns of interaction. For example, as a teacher, if I am teaching a room full of guys or a room full of girls, that's something I'm going to notice and will likely change the way I teach that chapter slightly. There are certain things I might say to a room full of guys that, as a guy, I would not say to a room full of girls because, I value my health and don't want to be chased out of the room. So gender is something that we certainly notice. We'll also find that those rules and norms of culture that we've been talking about most of this class change slightly based on our gender. Guys are generally taught one thing, girls are taught another, and the way that we are taught to interact with society also changes based on our gender. So being male or female will certainly make some decisions for us. What clothes we wear, if we're going to wear makeup or not, if it's appropriate to express emotion and in what situations we express that emotion, and things like that. So there are definitely some rules that apply only to guys, some rules that apply only to girls, and the social narratives of each culture tend to determine what those things are. We can't escape from social narratives. We hear them our entire life, and they are pretty powerful as a socializing agent in teaching us how we should be living and how we should be interacting with each other. So these things are pretty powerful. It's our idea of, I'm a guy, guys are masculine behavior is this set of things, and so as a guy, I want to be masculine, I must act this way. Or, I'm a girl, girls are feminine, appropriate femininity includes this list of behaviors, so as a girl, I must be feminine, I should act this way. Every society or culture that we come in contact with has these rules, though the rules themselves change depending upon the culture, the time, and place that we are in. A lot of us probably feel that gender expression is something that is innate, something that just sort of happens. At a certain age, we realize that we are a guy or a girl, and with that comes a certain set of behaviors that we feel natural to express. But as we'll find out through this chapter, socialization once again is a very, very powerful agent in teaching us what is appropriate masculinity and what is appropriate femininity. And these things get blurred and crossed a lot of times too. So gender as a social construction is going to be one of our main focuses. Segueing into the second part of our chapter, sexuality somewhat naturally follows from our gender roles, and through normative pressures of society, appropriate sexual expression also follows from our understanding of these rules. Sexuality is a characteristic that isn't as obvious as gender. Sexuality is something that can be hidden if one wants to do so, but it can greatly impact the way we see the world and the way the world sees and treats us. As we examined in previous chapters, specifically the chapter about deviance and crime, there has been a whole host of attempts in history to control sexual expression and determine what appropriate sexual expression is, some more successful than others. This chapter tries to highlight the ideas of sexual identity, which we now today use terms such as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, and there are probably a few that I'm leaving out of the list simply because we only have so much time. But these identities that we've come to know. Also, we tend to think of something as natural and innate to us. We like to have everything in a nice little box with a pretty bow tied on top. But again, humans kind of defy categorization. As we talked about in our race and ethnicity chapter, we like to apply certain broad stroked ideas to an entire group of people. And while that might work for chairs or birds or other sort of simple things in life, people, we tend to like to play to the exceptions more than the rules. So this becomes an area that is incredibly difficult to classify, but we'll try our best to give you some basic ideas. So our discussions this week will feature mostly on how society defines gender and sexuality and the experiences of people that either fit into our categories or don't so easily fit into our categories. Your collaboration this week in the discussion forum is going to be about a subtopic of this area, specifically sex education, how we teach the next generation what loving, healthy sexual relationships look like, and the roles of our social institutions in those lessons. Who should be teaching this stuff? Should it be the parents? Should it be the school? Should it be the church? And what should these lessons be? We'll also follow that discussion up on some solid social science research that shows us the impact of different education methods and looks at sexual education in this country as compared to some other countries. Your second discussion follows along the ideas of awakening sexuality. And the reason I've chosen this topic is because when we start talking about sex and sexuality, we start thinking about the ages that we first become aware of this stuff. BuzzFeed has a great presentation called Revisiting Movies That Have Awakened Your Sexuality, and that will be our introduction to the second half of this chapter and the content of your online lesson. They interview people about the first television or movie stars they took a special interest in and get them to talk about the feelings they had towards that special interest. How did they identify it? Did they automatically say, I'm attracted to this person? Or was it just, there's something really cool about that person and I don't know why? So I want you to pay attention to the way people talk about these experiences, how old they were when they had these experiences, and then turn that discussion more to your own personal experiences. So with that, I think I will leave you to the echo chapters for this capture, but I will make one important note. I've been teaching this lesson for 5 years now, and the gender makeup of the class is incredibly important to these discussions. Again, since gender is something that we are incredibly aware of, and it changes our interaction. If I've had more guys in the class than girls, you tend to hear more from the guys, and the conversation in class tends to feature the guys' point of view more. If there are more girls in class, then the girls tend to dominate discussion while the guys are quiet, and if there's an even mix, well, then the discussion can go anywhere. The captures that I've put together for this chapter, unfortunately, most of my classes this year were primarily female. So while I've cut together some clips from different classes so you can get more of the discussion, you're going to hear me pick on the guys quite a bit in these chapters because they were outnumbered and I think afraid to talk a little bit. So keep that in mind as you hear the discussion. If you don't hear much from the guys or you hear me picking on the guys, that's why, because I think they were scared. That's it for my introduction this week. I will leave you with the echo captures, and I'll be back next week when we talk about family